welcome back to Spin Magazine's Lip Service. Welcome into the show, Art Alexakis from Everclear. Did I mess that up or did I get it? A little bit. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people mess that up, by the way.
Man, as long as it's good on the check, I don't care.
What is the correct pronunciation, by the way?
Alex saw the band Kiss. Alexakis.
All right, we got it straight. We were just talking off camera, by the way. Our mutual friend Freddie has been playing bass with you for 14 years.
Yeah.
Pretty weird connection. I used to play in this band, the Boogie Nights, with him years ago. We were talking about that. Crazy, by the way. You said you hired them at one of your weddings years ago.
For one of my many weddings, yeah.
It's funny. The Boogie Nights, for those of you who don't know, were this band of everyone was like had a record deal, but nobody was making money. So we all like formed this weird coalition of probably, I guess, 30 or 40 members. Some of them went on to become Steel Panther. Freddie obviously joined your band about 40 years ago, but I think we were charging at some point like 10 grand, like playing disco, maybe more for a wedding. I don't remember, but
I think he was making more. He was making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I know. He said that he was making money hand over fist.
Which is great.
And then he could do his creative stuff, you know?
Yeah.
That was the idea, right? And now the guy who started that, the main guy, Jamie, he's got bands all over the country.
Yeah.
And not just that, he's Spasmatics, you know, all that stuff, 80s bands. Yeah.
It's weird because I used to put on this John Travolta wig and do that dance from Saturday Night Fever, and I'm not a dancer, so it was very embarrassing, but I'm an okay drummer, but not a dancer. Anyway, it's so great to see you, by the way. You're playing tonight, and we were just talking about sleeping on the bus and touring and whatnot. It is hard to sleep on the bus on the East Coast, I guess.
On the East Coast, there's just so much traffic on the roads. They just... You can't fix it. It just gets beat up too bad. It is what it is. And I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Yeah, I was mentioning that Pennsylvania, it feels like it goes on for like 3 days. Right?
Yeah, pretty much it does. Yeah, try to go like Philly to Pittsburgh. Yeah, forever.
Well, we have to talk. There's so much to get into. Obviously, your history, the new record, Live at the Whiskey, that Matt Pinfield, our other mutual friend, announces at the beginning of the record. But 30 years, now 31 years of Everclear. Years. Does it feel like a crazy milestone when you think about how long you've been a band and been able to make a great living doing this?
I guess if I look back on it with that kind of perspective, but I'm really just kind of whatever. I'm a whatever is in front of me kind of guy. You know, I'm just like, I don't really think about the past too much. I enjoy it. Like I get places and I remember different things in different times. You know, coming into New York, we've had some amazing shows or amazing experiences and some really crazy psycho experiences too.
That's what I want to know about, by the way.
Well, we can talk about a few of those. But you know, I'm just grateful to still be doing it. I'm 61. I've been clean and sober 34 years. I got diagnosed with MS, about multiple sclerosis, about 7 years ago, and I'm still playing.
Still, you're a fighter, which is what I love about you, by the way, and so many great stories and a great history and career. But let's talk about for a moment, let's kind of take it back, Art, to the beginning.
Well, you know, my family, it's funny, I just did a radio show with a legendary guy who originally was from Detroit, and my family, all my siblings were from Detroit. They were all born and raised there in Greektown. My dad's Greek. My mom was a hillbilly. So I'm half Greek, half hillbilly. And my mom was working, it was New Year's Day, 1959. My mom was working at Stouffer's, a big department store in their restaurant. And they brought in a colored TV that no one had ever seen before, colored TV. Brought it into the break room. And it was 40 below and just miserable outside Detroit, you know, in January. And she saw people twirling batons wearing bathing suits in the sunshine in California. And she goes, we're going there. 9 months later, we're out there. A year and a half later, they had me.
Wow, incredible story. And tell me a little bit about your upbringing. I mean, was your mom and dad into music? What was your first experience kind of getting into music early on?
That's a good question. You know, me growing up in the early, mid, late 60s, a lot of music in the house. My mom, hillbilly, loved country music, old school country music. My dad was into more of the crooners like Perry Como and especially Sinatra. And then my eldest sister was into Motown. My brother was into hard rock and my middle sister was into more like Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, that kind of stuff. And then my youngest sister was into pop, what they call bubblegum radio. And I loved everything. I loved it all. I don't think there's bad music. There's two kinds of music. Music I like, music I don't.
When you learned to play guitar like 14 or 15?
14, yeah.
14. And early at that point, was it like, were bands like the Tubes happening for you? What was with the music that you kind of really got you into playing guitar at that point?
Well, Aerosmith, Black Sabbath, the Beatles, I mean, when I was 4 years old, so that would be 1965, 66, 3.5 to 4 years old, I remember coming out and seeing the Beatles on TV. Not the first time they were on Ed Sullivan, but the last time. And I'd never seen anything like that. And I never wanted to do anything else from that moment.
I feel like so many people saw that pivotal moment and decided that was music.
That was it.
Yeah. And at some point you got into punk. We can't not talk about that. Bands like X and a lot of the early punk bands
X
from
is
LA.
one of my favorite bands.
Mine too, for sure. So talk to me about that. And because you can obviously hear a lot of the punk influences in some of your earlier stuff. Heroin Girl, a lot of the earlier songs.
Well, like I said, I grew up with like album-oriented rock and roll, more, like classic, what we call classic rock now. And I was living in Houston when I was 15 going on 16, and I met a kid there that was really into punk rock. And I had read about in Circus Magazine and Cream, I'd read about the Ramones and, all the bands, all the English bands. And finally I got to hear them. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But I refused to cut my hair. I had long hair. So I go to punk rock shows with long hair and I get in fights constantly. Because it was like, now it's like, you like metal, you like punk, who cares? Back then it was one or the other, man. You couldn't have them both.
And you would just get into fights for having long hair. That was it.
Pretty much.
Hey guys, today's episode of the show is brought to you by the all-new DLZ Creator by Mackie. The DLZ Creator is an adaptive digital mixer designed for podcasting and streaming, and it's what I'm using right now to make this very own podcast. What makes it so special? DLZ's Mix Agent technology takes all the hard parts out of making your podcast. It's amazing. It's easy to use. You have 3 selectable user modes from easy to enhanced to professional. DLZ allows creators to any experiences to make content of their own terms. With features like Setup Assistant, Audio Mix, Mackie has taken 30 years of audio legacy and packed all their expertise into a podcasting mixer that is not only top of the line, but incredibly easy to use. You can find out more about DLZ Creator at Mackie.com. Check it out, the amazing DLZ Creator.
Safe to say that it was sort of a troubled youth for you, right, growing up?
A little bit.
Talk to me about growing up and sort of some of the hardships growing up for you.
Well, my parents split up when I was about 5.5, 6, and my dad moved to Florida, which at that time, there was only 2 states in the United States that you couldn't go after people for child support, Florida and Texas. And when Florida changed their laws, incidentally, 5, 6 years later, he moved to Texas. So that's my dad. But my mom ended up moving to a housing project in Culver City, which is about 10 miles from Santa Monica. And
near Marina Del Rey, too.
And I went to Marina Del Rey High School, junior high school, And, and it was rough. I got into a lot of fights. I got beaten up a lot. But after about a year of assimilating, I had great friends that I still have to this day. And I was exposed to all sorts of music and culture, and it was cool. One of the bad things that happened there was there was this one family of boys that were a bit older that my mom said I was not to go into their house. And one day in the summertime, I went in their house, and they had some older boys over, one guy who was in his 20s, and I got beaten and raped.
Wow.
By
Crazy.
Obviously boys who had been beaten and raped themselves.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Hurt people. So I had that. Never told my mom about that because my mom kept a .38 under her mattress. She would have killed them.
I'm sure.
So I grew up with that. My brother died of an overdose when I was 12. He was 21. And instead of going away from the drugs, I ran to it. And I've been clean and sober now, but I was a street junkie, dealer, carried a gun, blackout drunk,
There's even stories of you breaking into people's houses to go through their medicine cabinets in middle school, right?
That was, wow. You did your work, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was 8th grade. So 13.
So what would you do? You would just go to your friends' houses? Their parents would be out of town and you would raid them?
Like we would ditch school. A bunch of us kids would get on our motocross bikes, right? And we just drive around neighborhoods and we look for houses that looked nice but didn't have any cars in the driveway. And we go in the backyard. And back then in the 70s, people would leave their doors open. Or I would crawl through a dog door, which is really stupid because if I could, I was really skinny, right? I was the skinny one. I was kind of the protagonist, but I was also kind of small. And we would go in and rip off money, drugs, food.
There was no Ring cameras back then. It was just free for all. People would leave their doors open.
Yeah, people leave their doors open.
Yeah. Did you ever go into one of those dog doors and encounter a German Shepherd or something? Or a Rottweiler?
No, I don't know if I'd be here if I did, or my face would look a little different. Yeah, no, man. One time I remember I went through the doggy door and there was an envelope on the table and it said, Jimmy's insurance money, and there was $1,400. Now, you got to get this in context. This is 1975. $1,400. Minimum wage at the time was $1.99.
That was like 10 grand back then. Or something.
God, no, it was more.
More, 20.
Yeah, 15 grand, something like that. And we just took all that money and bought drugs and went to Shakey's Pizza. And
it's a lot of pizza.
But the cops, we did a lot of stuff with it. But I got busted somewhere down the line because a kid told on it. And I went to juvie for the first time, and then I got out after about a couple of weeks, and they let my mom send me up to Oregon, and that started her shipping me away, me coming back, getting into trouble, her shipping me away. And when I went to Texas that one time, she sent me to my dad. She didn't even tell him I was coming till I was in the plane. She goes, "He's yours now. Go."
What was that like? Because you and your dad had this strange
I didn't know
relation.
him.
Yeah.
I didn't know him. He showed up for my brother's funeral, and I didn't know this guy. I hadn't seen him since almost 10 years. I'd seen him once in 10 years. So it was bizarre. And my dad passed, incidentally, about 7 years ago. He died 3 days before David Bowie did. And I was sad, but not really that broken up about it because I really didn't know him.
Yeah.
I wasn't mad at him. I'm not mad at him anymore. I didn't hold on to that. But I was hurt more by David Bowie. And I didn't know David. I mean, I met him one time at a show, and he was very polite and very nice to me like he is. But I didn't know him, but just his music.
It touched everyone, yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
How could it not?
He made it not bad, or made it okay to be weird and be different, be a freak and be yourself, right? And so that's it. That was that. But
did your father start coming around at a certain point when you had success, like a lot of these dads do when their sons are famous? Was he like, by the way, now I'm back, and you're like, well, talk about father of mine at a certain point?
Well, he called. He called. He reached out through my sisters. I really didn't have much to do with him.
Like you don't hear from him for 20 years, and then all of a sudden,
there was a little bit of that. He's like, I heard you wrote a song about me, son. I hope you did me proud. I go, well, Dad, I was honest.
You might want to listen to it.
Well, Dad, I was honest. You should hear it. And it's like one of my sisters, and I didn't get along very well with my sisters. As they grew up, they became super right-wing, right? Born again, just these days they would be QAnon, MAGA. And, but someone asked my sister if I was exaggerating about my dad, and she goes, Arthur was being nice.
Yeah.
I was being kind. Yeah, because she had even worse experience with him, and
super unfortunate, but also the source of some incredible material and great songs. But I wanted to have one other thing which kind of caused you to get sober. At a certain point, you almost had like an overdose. It
was a heart attack.
A near fatal overdose.
It was
right?
an overdose.
Yeah.
Well, that happened several times. But
and was that the pivotal point for you when you decided to get clean and sober?
No, not really. I mean, I backed off it for about a month, and then I started back up again. And then I ended up in detox, and I had super bad after stopping doing the drugs, after not doing the drugs for about a month, my body freaked out because I've been drinking and doing drugs since I was 9, 8, 9. I used to go to friends' houses when they'd have parties, and we'd drink the remnants of drinks. And I was constantly going to friends' house and stealing a little bit of alcohol. I'd learned how to steal the vodka, even though I didn't like vodka that much, but put water in the bottle,
Yeah, of course.
Those kind of
we
tricks.
did back then.
Yeah, everybody did that.
Yeah.
But I was doing it at 8 and 9. And 10, 11, 11, I started doing acid. 12, 13, I started shooting speed. And just went from there.
What's crazy is that all this happened pre you making it in Everclear, because you really Everclear didn't form until you were like 30 or 31.
I was clean.
Yeah.
I was clean.
So all this happened pre-Everclear.
Yeah.
Which is usually it happens in the reverse order. So
I know.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't have happened for me. I wouldn't have had success.
If
I
that
wouldn't
was
have been
going
able
on.
to,
Yeah.
Because when I got clean and sober, it gave me the drive I hadn't had for a long time.
So let's talk about that for a minute. Like 87, 88, the height of hair metal, you moved to Frisco and get into the Cowpunk movement there, which, to be honest with you, we have to talk about that for a minute because I'm not quite sure some of the bigger bands in that movement up there. I was going up there a bunch. And we were playing at, I don't know, I think there was Slims maybe? Was there?
Slims.
And there was a bunch of clubs we were playing up there.
Slims
but
just closed.
Did it really?
Yeah.
But in 87, 88, it was up in San Francisco. It was Vane. It was a lot of these bands from San Francisco. So the height of the hair metal stuff was Motley. It was Rad, Poison, whatever it may be. And you were going in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things is, and people get this as a misnomer, Cowpunk was an LA thing. That was 83, 84, 85. So there's bands like Blood on the Saddle, Guns and Tex and the Horseheads.
Well, Broken Homes?
The Gun Club.
Was Broken Homes considered more?
Not really.
More Stonesy, I guess, right?
More Stonesy.
Yeah.
More Stonesy. But it had that roots thing. It all emanated from X, who you're a fan of as well. Their country kind of roots, as they progressed, that really came to the forefront. So I think a lot of bands were inspired by that. But when I moved up in 88 to San Francisco, mainly because you couldn't get a gig in LA unless you were a butt rock.
Right. It was pay to play.
It was pay to play.
Everyone. It's fun. For people that don't know, 87, 88, 89 on the Sunset Strip, there was probably 5,000 people every weekend on the Strip passing out flyers.
Yeah.
Everyone looked, everyone was
And with big hair.
big hair.
Guys had better hair than the girls,
Right.
for
So
sure.
if you didn't look like that and you weren't in that type of band, I mean, like we spoke about, there were other bands. There was this alternate scene of Jane's Addiction and X and a lot of those Tex and the Horseheads and a lot of those bands. But yeah, you're right. I mean, most of the bands that were sort of mainstream at that point were doing the hair metal thing.
Yeah.
So you move up to San Francisco. It's your second band, and Easy Hose. And you make a record, you make an EP, and you decide
Make a record.
make a record.
Make a record, and I started a record label. A guy, I was working in an office, and one of the guys that worked there came to see me play, and he's like, "Man, I get it. You're a really talented guitar player and singer, and it makes sense now." I go, "What makes sense?" He goes, "Why you're so bad at your job?" Because you don't care about it. He goes, and he fronted me some money, and I started a little record label called Shindig Records. And at that time in San Francisco, there was this great alternative country scene. So it wasn't like cowpunk. It wasn't like noisy and punkish. It was more new wave-ish with like a country feel. And
Who were some of the bands back then in Frisco that
the
were?
the Wannabe Texans, Jerry Shelfer. There was, let's see, some of the bigger bands were Buck Naked and the Bare Bottom Boys.
Okay, sure.
Bands like that. And I went in and produced a song from all of them and did a compilation called Lazy, Loud, and Liquored Up because I was still drinking at the time.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great album if you can find it. And I actually just found the master tapes for all that stuff. So I plan on putting a reissue out.
Amazing.
Be great on vinyl.
Yeah, talk to me about the point from there into how you met what came to be Everclear, because you at a certain point you moved to Portland, and you still, you did A&R at Capitol too, in between all that.
Yeah, that was way
after that.
Way in the future. So after the Easy Hose broke up, because we had a girl bass player and the two guitar players were seeing the big girl bass player. That's
And
what happens.
That's what was going on back then, I guess, right?
Well, it happens just about every band I've ever seen. Anyways, I started a band called Colorfinger. Stupid name, good band. Less country-ish, more rock, more what would come to be called alternative rock. And I toured on that a lot. We put out a record, our own record, called Deep in the Heart of the Beast in the Sun. And I met a girl in Portland at a record store. And she moved down, after a couple of months of long distance, she moved down and lived with me in San Francisco. And then we, and by the way, I was still married to my first wife. We were separated. And then she got pregnant and we moved back to Portland. We moved to Portland for the first time because she had family there for support with the kid, and I had family there. One of my sisters lived in Portland. So I moved to Portland, and I decided I was going to start one more band, and that was going to be it. I was 30, which in the rock
was almost
ancient,
old.
ancient, just ancient.
Yeah.
And I put an ad in the paper and got some guys, and weren't very good. We played all summer. My daughter was born in June. Played all summer and fall. And then I got a chance to record a demo. I was digging a ditch for extra money or digging out a garden for extra money. I saw these guys hipster guys going in and out of a garage or a basement. And I'm like, oh, it's a drug deal, right? That's a drug deal.
Sure.
And it was actually, I yelled at the guy. I go, hey, what's going on? He goes, yeah, you're in that band Evergreen, right? And I go, yeah, whatever. Yeah, Evergreen. And he goes, want to see my studio? And I'm like, it's pretty cool. It's a 1/4-inch 8-track. He had some cool mics and, total eggshells on the walls type of thing. I'm like, how much you charge? He goes, $10 an hour. I go, I've got an old quadriverb and a digital delay. Would you be interested in trading for it? And he goes, yeah, man. I brought it over. He goes, I'll give you $400 in trade for it. That's 40 hours. We had 12 songs. I go, that's
all you need.
Awesome. We recorded it. And I one of the reasons I did it is because I wanted to see if there was something to that band, whether there was something there. You need to hear it, you know. And it obviously was. And I sent it to South by Southwest, and they accepted us. They called us. They're like late entry, put us on 2 showcases. And before we left town, I made up a bunch of tapes, and I sent them to venues and writers and papers all over the Northwest. And
sort of self-managing the band at that point.
Yeah,
right?
pretty much, yeah. And on the way back, I called my girlfriend, soon to be my second wife. She's like, man, you better get home. There's 62 messages on our phone machine. This is before voicemail. This is a phone machine. Yeah. And yeah, people were going crazy for it. They were calling it the best Portland debut record. And I'm like, record? Okay, I guess it's a record, So, yeah. And that's how it started. And we spent 93 as like the big local band opening for nationals. And then in 94, we got a bunch of offers. It was turning into a bidding war. And I basically narrowed it down by saying, I want total creative control, and I produce my own records. And that left us with about 7 labels, and we picked Capitol.
By the way, fairly bold for back then. You said to the labels, unless I can produce the records myself, there's no deal.
I'll just stay on the indie. Yeah, it was like they're like, okay, I'm like, I want this much money. Right. They're like, that's reasonable. This many firm records. I want 3/4 mechanicals, turns, at this increment goes to this and this and this. And everyone was like, yeah, that's all reasonable. I go, oh yeah, by the way, total creative control on everything. You cannot do anything without my signature on it. And I produced my own records. No one was doing that.
And I'm not going to send you any demos on top of it.
No demos. Right. Yeah, exactly. I've never done a demo in my life.
You end up working with Gary Gersh, who signed Nirvana, Sonic Youth, the Counting Crows. What was that like? How'd you meet him? What was that first meeting like, by the way?
I got Gershed. I think I came up with that term. I got Gershed. I actually went to Capitol because of this guy, Perry Watts Russell. Who,
sure.
Do you know Perry?
British.
Yeah, British. Yeah. Very stoic dude. Mm-hmm. But just a great guy, a great friend of mine, even to this day. He's a real estate mogul now.
Yeah.
And he was always trying to get me into real estate in the day, and I didn't listen to him. Stupid me. And after I was with Perry, I went up and met Gary, and Gary's like, Gary didn't even know what we sounded like. He's like, you guys are great. I love everything. You got to be here.
I've never heard you, but you're great.
Yeah. He didn't say that. That was Gersh.
Right.
Yeah. And we signed with Capitol and went and made our record in Madison, Wisconsin at Smart Studios. And, the first single didn't do so well, Heroin Girl. And the second single did. It's called Santa Monica.
We were just reminiscing about our mutual friend, Matt Pinfield. I feel like Matt was probably one of the first people I would imagine on 120 Minutes to play some of the music, right? Or he definitely was a fan early on, championing the band.
I met Matt in late 93 when we were on tour when he was working in Neptune.
All right.
In Neptune, New Jersey as a PD at the radio station.
He tells me about it all the time.
Yeah. He still had a little hair around the side. It's kind of the Don Rickles thing. Yeah. And so we've been friends ever since then.
The best.
And we had a lot of things in common. Recovery, coming from our backgrounds. Even though he was East Coast, I was West Coast, we've always been really, really good friends.
Yeah, was there a lot of pressure? Like, as you think back to 94, I think you said you were making something like $1,500 that year before you got the deal. Then all of a sudden it was something like $84,000. And was there a lot of pressure building up to that first record, Sparkle and Fade, which, as you mentioned, the second single really took off for you. But did you feel after making so little money for so many years and never really having success to produce this massive record early on?
No, I just wanted to make the best record I could make. I'd never had a budget before.
Yeah.
I'd never been able to work with people like that and like real stone cold mixers, that worked in real studios. I'd never had that kind of experience. I've never worked on anything over 16 track. So it was exciting to be able to go in there and do it. And every subsequent record after that, I did the same thing. I would hire good people to work with, but I'd be there for every note recorded.
Imagine if we had the technology today back then, because you were dealing with 8 tracks early on. You couldn't even separate the drums. There was like bleed through with the drums, and you were putting drums on the same track as, the mic or whatever.
Well, not the drums. We gave 4 of the 8 tracks to drums.
Yeah.
Bass was 5. Guitar was 6. Lead vocal was 7. So if we either had to have a lead guitar or a harmony vocal.
You had to choose.
Yeah.
And if we had the technology today that we had back then, do you think you would have been making different records?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. It's much easier and cheaper to make a record now.
Yeah, no question.
It's much easier and cheaper to make a movie now, with digital. The digital cameras look amazing.
Yeah.
So it's a different world, but for the time that we were in, I was happy with what we were able to do. And like every band back then, we were all influenced by Nirvana, whether you say you were or not. Maybe not the music, but definitely by the model of them doing a record for $600 and just making a great record,
And the songwriting, which was incredible back then.
Which was incredible.
Yeah. Talk to me about a couple of pivotal moments for the band. We were just talking about your father, Father of Mine, such an important song for the history of Everclear. Tell me the story behind it. You touched base on your father and your relationship with him, but talk to me about really what it meant back then and the story behind that song, which became one of your biggest songs.
Yeah. So after the success of our first record on Sparkle and Fade on Capitol, I bought a big house up in the West Hills and proceeded to make our next record, which was going to, at the time was called Pure White Evil, and ultimately it was going to be called So Much for the Afterglow. But I remember one night putting my daughter at the time to bed. She was like 4 or 5, and maybe 5 or 6. And something that parents do, especially parents that don't have a lot of money, you watch your kids sleep. You just watch them sleep. It's just special to watch them sleep. And I remember looking at her and just going, how do you walk away from that? How do you do that? Something that special, something that connected, someone who loves you that much. How do you walk away from that? I didn't understand it. And I went to my I had one of the bedrooms like an office and kind of study. I had guitars and stuff in there, and I just stayed up all night and wrote that song.
It's fairly therapeutic for you, I would imagine.
It was
right?
catharsis for sure. Yeah.
Because your mom really raised you, more or less,
Yeah,
right?
my mom raised me, and she was crazy hillbilly, but she loved me fiercely from the moment I was born to the moment she died.
And we were just talking about your dad, and your dad did sort of pop up after. Do you remember his reaction to the song when you finally listened to the lyrics?
Yeah, he ghosted me. I didn't hear. I didn't hear about it.
Typical, I would imagine,
Yeah.
because you were just being honest and really vulnerable.
Shocker.
Yeah. I think a lot of people really connected with your vulnerability in a lot of those songs. And even to this day, I'm sure there's people that come up to you all the time and say, your music got me through such a hard time. I'm clean and sober, whatever it may be. My parents, I had some issues. So any amazing stories that you can remember of people coming up to getting your music, getting them through those hard times?
I literally hear it every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that people come up to me and we'll talk about it later. But I have a new song called "Sing Away" that's about suicide and teen bullying, and that's really touching a nerve as well right now. Yeah, I like to write songs from the first person, and I like to write songs about things that matter to me.
Speaking of which, wonderful. I think a lot of people don't really know what that's about, but ultimately, it's a very happy song about divorce and the eyes of a child, through the eyes of a child, right? Yeah. So probably people listen to it, and lyrically, if they don't really delve into it, they probably think on the outside it's this shiny, bright song, but ultimately, it really is about what a child is going through divorce. So talking about another highlight of yours.
Well, being a child of divorce and watching my daughter go through divorce with her mom was one of the hardest things I ever did, and a lot of guilt and shame because I knew I was pretty much responsible for it. She wasn't innocent, but not compared to me. I mean, I basically was clean and sober, and I wasn't using, but I wasn't going to meetings, I wasn't working a program, and so I was what we call in the program dry drunk. Off and on for many years, especially during all the success. And I was using sex and relationships and power and control and all that stuff as a substitute for drugs and alcohol. And so when I saw how much pain I had created in my daughter, I wrote that song, not just about her, but about me and about friends of mine who were going through similar things. And it was just looking at divorce, like you said, from the kid's point of view. Yeah.
When your daughter listens to that song now, because I know you're a family man and I know you're very close with your kids, what does she think? Does she look at that song as sort of like a template to how she grew up? And
we don't talk about it.
You don't talk about it, right?
She doesn't talk about it. Yeah.
Is she a fan of the band? I assume she is. Right?
I assume so.
Yeah,
I hope so. She's a fan of me paying for college.
Right. Another song, another pivotal moment. I'll buy you a new car. So I want to talk about the story behind that.
I will buy you a new life.
A new life. I'm sorry. I'll buy you. Yes. So let's talk about that a little bit.
I'll buy you a car too.
It's about dreaming about a better life, and you were just kind of rolling around and driving through West Hills at some point, looking at the houses, thinking at some point I'd love to live here, right? And admiring all the houses there. Talk to me about the story behind that song.
Well, when I was living before we got signed to Capitol, I'd be about 6-8 months before, we were living, me and my daughter and her mom were living in a part of Portland called Felony Flats. Great place to go if you want to buy crack
Right.
or speed or dope or whatever. It was pretty, not a great neighborhood. But we would get in my beat-up Nissan Sentra that didn't even have a lock on the back or a broken windshield and all this stuff. And we would get a Happy Meal for my daughter, pretty trashy, and drive up to where all these beautiful houses are, $1 million houses. And we'd park and we'd just like look in that house. And she'd like this house, but I like this yard over here. And we just fantasized about it. And 2 years after doing that, we actually bought a house up in the West Hills.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you manifest it, there is some truth that it can happen.
Yeah,
sure.
I guess so. I think so much of that is wishful thinking, you know, the whole vision board and all that stuff. But Yeah,
But it
can't
did
hurt.
happen for you. So there is some truth to that, I guess, if you work hard and you're talented for sure. But let's talk about it a little bit. You touched base on it before, but 2019, you get this diagnosis for MS. And
2016.
2016, I'm sorry. And let's talk about what it, kind of like today, where you're at with it, and obviously what it meant back then when you found out and how it affected you. I saw you wearing this great shirt that said, I'm not drunk, I have MS or something, and something to that effect.
Well, so in 2016, I was driving up to my daughter's school, and it was raining. And in LA, people have no idea how to drive in the rain.
Exactly.
They
The
lose
worst.
their minds.
Yeah.
And there's so much oil on the road, and my brakes just went all the way. New car too.
Yeah.
Just went all the way to the ground, and I plowed in the back of a car. No one was hurt. Car was totaled. I was okay, kind of shooken up, a little bruised. But about 2 weeks later, I started getting this twinge in my neck. And I called my orthopedic surgeon. He's like, well, go get an MRI. I'll set you up for an MRI. Then come in, I'll find out where it is, and I'll put an epidural shot and just loosen it up. It'll be fine. And so I went and got an MRI, and I went to his little examination room like I always do. And I walk in, there's like 5 guys in there in like coats with clipboards. And I walk in, they're all talking. And when I walk in, they all just stopped and looked at me like that. And I'm like, this isn't good. I don't know what this is.
That could never be good.
This is not good.
Yeah.
And they told me that the pathologist that had done the MRI had seen lesions on my spine and on my brain as well. And 2 of the guys that were in the room were neurologists, and they showed the MRI to me on the screen and said, this is MS. And have you suffered from these things, balance issues, this and this, like weakness on one side? And I'm like, yeah, I have. I thought it was just me getting older and just
normal things that happen to you.
yeah,
Right?
and I'd done a lot of drugs and a lot of stuff. I just figured it was, glorious results of a misspent youth. I was willing to live with it, but they thought that, or they're part of my diagnosis. I went to 2 neurologists after that, and they told me that they thought I'd had it over 20 years, maybe even 40 years.
Crazy.
Yeah. But
because it's harder to get out of bed when you get older. It's harder to remember things. Like everything goes to shit a little bit.
Well,
but
everything goes to shit a little bit, but I mean, this is like having an extra 10, 15 years on you at any time. But when they told me, I kept it together. I walked out to the parking lot, and I FaceTimed my wife, and I told her, and we both just started bawling, just started crying. Because it's scary, man. I didn't know what the hell multiple sclerosis was. I'd never met anybody that had it. Actually, I found out later I met a lot of people that had it, but they hadn't told anybody. But at the time, I drove home. I was about 40 minutes away from my house. By the time I get home, my wife's got her laptop, my laptop, our daughter's iPad. It looked like she's trying to hack into Fort Knox or something.
just researching.
She's just researching.
Yeah.
And she's like, baby, we got this. We got this. And and we've just, I was doing really good with the first medication they gave me until I caught COVID in 2021. And I was in the hospital for about 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
And then I was in bed for another month with really bad pneumonia. And
I would imagine you really assess your life at that point, and it makes you think of things a lot differently, right?
well, no, it progressed it. It gave me more lesions. So walking's harder for me now. Everything's harder. Fatigue's harder for me now. I'm on a good medication. I've got a good diet. But, it's things that used to come easy for me are harder now physically.
When you're performing, do you forget the lyrics here and there? Things like that happen, or not so much?
A little bit, but I've always done that.
Right.
I've done that my whole life. I'm just not that smart.
Before that happened.
Yeah. I don't think cognitively it's affected me that much.
Because you're now what, like 7 years into knowing you had it at this point, right?
Right.
Yeah. So do you approach life a little bit differently, or
Sure.
you do? Yeah.
Yeah.
Living every day to the fullest, for sure. Well, let's talk about, we touched base on it a little bit, but 30 years, now it's 31 years of Everclear. So again, I kind of asked you, like, what does it mean to you at this point? Because you probably didn't think years ago, after making it at like 31, that you'd be sitting here 30 years later still having this incredible career. Or did you just think this is going to go on for 5 records and we'll be done?
Yeah, I thought 4 records.
Yeah.
You know, there's interviews of me.
I saw some where you're
you
like,
know, where I'm like, I think most
records.
Bands should hang it up after 4 or 5 records.
Well, you're cocky when you're younger.
But everybody said that.
Yeah.
Mick Jagger said that. He goes, I'm not going to be 40 years old singing Satisfaction. Well, he's 80 singing Satisfaction.
50 years later with Mick Jagger,
Wow, so, you know, I mean, really what it comes down to is, what are we going to do? What are musicians going to do? This is what I do.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it till no one wants to buy tickets anymore because I have to. That's what I do.
And it's also what you love doing.
Yeah, but it's what I love to do, but it's also.
Oh, you know.
Yeah, I not only that, it's not just for the money. It's just, who I am. I've been a musician my whole life.
You recently went back to school too, didn't you?
I did. I'm still working on. I'm about a year away from getting my degree. I promised my mom I would get my degree, but I did life coaching courses and stuff, and I'm about 6 months away from getting alcohol drug certification to work with people in recovery as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I know Matt does a lot of work with people in recovery
He
too.
does.
He's got his own podcast for that specifically.
I was on it. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, let's talk about a couple other career highlights. Working with Baz Luhrmann, who's become such a force in pop culture years later, 96, I think, Romeo and Juliet soundtrack.
Yeah.
So how did that come about for you? Was it just an email that you got? Did you meet Baz?
I did meet Baz, but we were really successful in Australia. Like if we were platinum here, we were double or triple platinum there. Not as many records, but per capita, more records. And he asked us to be a part of it, much to the chagrin of his music director, Nelly, who didn't want us on the label.
All right.
He didn't want a rock band.
Is that Nelly Hooper?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, he didn't want us on it. Yeah. And he didn't like the song.
Still got on there.
But no. Baz loved the song.
Yeah.
Baz loved the song. And we put it on the record. And what's funny, and you've been in the business long enough to know how it works. So they put that record out. It was on Capitol, right? So we negotiated a really good deal. I made more money on that record than I did on Sparkle and Fade.
Amazing.
Like a lot more money. But it wasn't a hit. It wasn't going to be a hit. It was the second song on the record. And then when we played Australia, after that record came out and we were down in Australia, the head of Australia EMI was like, hey, mate, where's Local God on the set list? I go, we're not doing that. It's a soundtrack. He goes, yeah, you are doing it. And he goes, it's #1 at 3 different formats down here. So we had to learn to do it.
I always talk about that movie Searching for Sugar Man, where people go to countries and they don't know they're like famous, or songs are blowing up in countries that they don't know. Yeah. That guy just actually recently passed away. Yeah, really sad. Great movie, by the way. Also, let's talk about Summerland for a moment. Is there plans to bring that back?
I think so, yeah. We'll look at it. I mean, there's bands I'd like to get that have never been on it, that I think are at the right size. I mean, some bands are too big, some bands are too small. But there's a few bands on there I'd like to do something different if we can get them. So right now I'm just I'm in the middle of a tour right now, and we're having a great time, and I just want to get done with this, get home, and then start thinking about next year.
We should talk about the gig tonight and also the new record, Live at the Whiskey, by the way. So is it hard to put together a set list with so many great songs? Your catalog is incredible. I was spending some time with it before we did this. So many great songs. It's probably a little challenging with so many great songs. Everybody wants to hear the hits.
Well, I always play the hits. I get very frustrated with bands who don't play their hits.
Yeah, I have my own stories about playing in my own bands when I work with artists that don't want to play the hits. And I'm just like,
you have opinions about it too.
I do.
That's why people are there, man.
Yeah.
And to me, those hits have been good friends. They've changed my life in a better way.
No question.
And so I look at it like that. But we play the hits, we play fan favorites, And then people can hit us up on social media, even for the show tonight at the Gramercy. If you got requests and we know how to play it, we'll play it. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the record. It was the first time in your career that you ever played the Whiskey, which is strange because you're almost like an LA band, but from Portland. But I kind of associate you with, especially having Santa Monica as one of your biggest songs.
I know a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
We're an LA band. Well, I grew up in LA, and all my friends played the Whiskey. I used to go see bands at the Whiskey, and I've been backstage. I've gotten into fights. I've blacked out drunk there. I've sold drugs there. Had sex in the backstage, but never played there until last December 1st. And
good sounding room, by the way.
It sounds good.
Sounds good.
And they're set up for recording. They got mics everywhere. And I booked it. It was an underplay for us, but we booked it because I wanted to play there. And I wanted to end the 30th anniversary tour there. And then I get a call from a friend of mine who used to be an A&R guy at Capitol, not mine, but an A&R guy. And he asked me if I wanted to make a new original record. And I'm like, absolutely not.
Now, why is that, by the way? Because you haven't made a new record in like 8 years or so.
Why?
Yeah, why?
I've made 9.
Right. Do you feel like you'll ever, I know there's a couple new songs on this record, but
I want to do a song every year, 1 or 2 songs every year.
Because you feel like people digest music differently.
It's just fun.
Right.
That's not work. To do a song, spend a week doing a song and mixed and mastered, it's done. And do a video for it, spend a few grand on it. It's fun. Making an album, album's going to take a year of my time.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel the need to do it at this point. But he's like, well, what about a live album? You're playing the Whiskey. You want to record a live album? I go, yeah, that's a good idea. So I called Jim Kaufman, who's my guy, and he's a friend of Matt's too. And he co-produced it with me and recorded and mixed it. And we recorded it and listened to it. I wasn't even sure I was going to give it to the label, but it sounded great. So they asked for 15 live tracks and 2 studio tracks. So we already had Year of the Tiger, which is a song we'd done last year. So we recorded a song that was on my solo record in 2019. And you thought that that's when I was diagnosed. That's when I came out to the world that I had MS.
Sure.
So that's
makes sense, yeah.
disconnect there. But there was a song on there called Sing Away that was more acoustic. And it always sounded like an Everclear song. It needed to be done with the big guitars and the full Everclear treatment. And we went in and recorded it in one day.
It's fascinating because when we were growing up, you had these records. You had Cheap Trick live at Budokan, Frampton Comes Alive, Kiss Alive. They were pivotal records in their careers, and everyone did a live record. Bands don't really make live records anymore. So why did you find a need to kind of make one? Because ultimately, like, that was the thing to do back then. And it's a great sounding record, by the way. The record is incredible, and the hits really come alive. The songs come alive. It's a great sounding record. But back then, as I said, everyone was doing them, and a lot of them weren't even live.
No, most of them weren't. All the ones you just mentioned weren't.
I think Cheap Trick live at Budokan might have been live.
That was live.
Yeah.
That was live. But they were tight live if you ever saw them. But Frampton, Kiss,
not live.
No. And my favorite live albums are a lot like The Who live at Leeds, any band that played the Fillmore, and that sounds like a live record.
Yeah.
And I wanted this to sound like a live record. And most live records are recorded when they'll take 3 or 4 shows, and they'll take different tracks off, right? And I just wanted to record one show. And we've got it all on video. And we're going to release the video later this year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So warts and all, there's nothing that you fixed in the studio.
No, there was a couple lines that I re-sang because I was off mic,
Yeah.
So, and there was a couple chords that I'd missed and maybe my guitar player missed. And we fixed that, but no Pro Tooling or Auto-Tune or Melodyne or whatever you call it. Not a lot of that.
And talk to me about a couple of the new tracks on the record, the studio tracks, because as you said, you'll probably release 1 song a year or 2 songs, right? A couple songs a year, hopefully. So talk to me about a couple of the new songs on the record too.
Well, I did it originally. The new songs on the record are Sing Away, a song about teen bullying and suicide, and that's the single that's out now. and we did a video of it about 5 weeks ago, and it came out. It's really powerful, and it's my daughter is actually in it. We needed a girl to play the girlfriend of the boy who was the protagonist, and so we kept my daughter home from school one day, took her in.
Amazing.
It's cool. The other song is a song called "Year of the Tiger" that came out last year. That's pretty much. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a singer of a big punk rock band that everybody knows, and
Fat Mike or something?
no, I'm not gonna say. I'm not gonna say.
Okay.
No, not Mike, but Mike's a friend too. But he's. I'm like, what do you think of it, man? I think it's like a protest song. He's like, dude, don't flatter yourself. It's not a protest song. It's a fight song, Art. You're trying to start shit. You're trying to pick a fight with the right, and that's pretty much what it was. Yeah.
Well, it's a great record. So pick up the record or download the record, however you listen to music. We do these really top 5 lists that are really fun. They go kind of viral at the end of the show, Art. So I want to get into a couple lists with you. So let me ask you first, your top 5 best alternative rock bands of the 90s.
Okay.
Starting with number 5.
Starting with number 5. I'll put us at number 5.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay. We can do that.
I can do that. I can do anything I want.
Yeah.
Number 4, I would have to say the Toadies. Big
Great
fan of
band,
the Toadies. And
Underrated, by the way.
way underrated.
Yeah.
Well, and so good. It's like, and so alternative bands of the 90s, I have to put this band as number 2, but let me get to number 3 first. Sonic Youth.
Another amazing band.
Number 2 would be Nirvana.
Yeah.
And number 1 would be the Pixies.
Amazing.
Yeah.
By the way, I saw the Pixies play last night on YouTube. They played at the Hollywood Bowl. They
Hollywood
still
Bowl.
sound incredible.
They're still great.
Still sound incredible. Well, actually, the Pixies, Nirvana, there's a connection there. It all started
Absolutely.
with them, so for sure. And because we were just talking about your live record, your favorite top 5 live rock albums of all time.
Starting with number 5. Let's see. I'm going to say the Allman Brothers at the Fillmore East. Humble Pie at the Fillmore East.
Number 3.
Cheap Trick Budokan. Number 2, probably Kiss Alive, the first one.
And was that a studio version or is that
Yeah, but it's still, it's a live album.
Okay.
Whether it really was a live album, we don't know. We know the rumors. But number 1 is, I was talking about it before, The Who, Live at Leeds.
Live at Leeds.
Yeah.
Incredible. And are you a foodie, by the way?
I am.
Okay, so I am too. And we should talk about your top 5 best restaurants in LA. Or it could be Santa Monica, wherever in LA that you pick.
I live in Pasadena now.
Okay, so anywhere in California, but your top 5 best restaurants.
Anywhere in the world?
Starting with number 5. No, in California. Because again, I think a lot of people associate you with a band, even though you're from Portland.
Yeah, but the places I like don't last very long. They're like pop-ups and they go away. But you know what? I'll go to the cultural food that I grew up with. So number 5 would probably be a restaurant out in Pasadena called Plate 38. It's a dinner house, but they're very inventive. The chef there is just like pretty fearless. It's pretty great. Number 4, In-N-Out Burger.
Classic.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong. Do you have an animal style? What style do you?
Nah, I go
Classic.
I go classic.
Okay.
Yeah. No spread. I don't like mayonnaise. Anything with mayonnaise, not a fan.
By the way, it's weird they never opened up on the East Coast. I mean, it's such a...
They're working their way they're working their way out
I don't
here.
understand it. I don't get it. But
they're working their way out
I don't
here.
want to digress. It could be an In-N-Out podcast to itself. So number 3.
So number 3 would be Nobu Sushi Malibu.
Yeah, great.
If you can
Classic.
afford it, it's amazing.
It'll cost you $500, but
$5,000, yeah.
Number 2.
Number 2 is a steakhouse in Pasadena called the Arroyo Chop House. Everybody I take there is just blown away. It's the best steak. It's one of the best steaks in the world I've ever had. And the number 1 in Culver City, actually, I missed Tommy's Burger. That's an honorable mention.
Yeah.
Yeah. But number 1 is Johnny's Pastrami, which has been there since 1948.
I've never been there. It's on my list now, though.
Dude, it's the best pastrami.
Now, do you go to Cat Swing in New York?
No, it's not. It's not that kind of. It's a California roast pastrami sandwich.
Okay.
So it's on a roll. It's got an au jus. You get it with Swiss cheese, which you, of course, would never do with anything kosher, right? But
it's amazing the things we get excited about when we get older, right? The pastrami and whatever.
You see my eyes lighting up? Your eyes are lighting up too.
What's next for you, by the way? Obviously, the tour is in full swing now. What else is anything else we should mention that we didn't touch on?
No, we're gonna we toured. We did a big tour of Australia in February this year. I'm going back this next February solo, do a solo tour. And other than that, just more shows. I'm a life coach. I work with people who are creatives, work in the creative industries. A lot of people who are in recovery or trying to get in recovery, and do that. And I've got a literary agent now, and
You're writing a book?
I've got offers to write a book.
Amazing. I'd love to see your story come to life on the big screen.
Yeah, me too.
Well, this tour runs through October 27th, which is amazing. Thanks for coming in. Maybe you could be my life coach one day, which would be great. So I feel like I might hit you up for that at some point. Art, it's been a pleasure. We have a lot of mutual friends. It's great to sit with you. We need to do this again.
That'd be great.
At some point. Awesome. Thanks for coming in. I
Thanks
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.